Hello everybody and welcome back to video 3 of An Educator's Guide to Discord. This video is going to be touching a lot on moderation and supervision. So this is probably going to be the longest video in this series because this topic is very serious, and setting this up for a school or for a classroom, there's a lot of things to unpack in terms of proper use, terms of service, and community guidelines. So just to start, when you are setting up a Discord server, it's really essential to take in mind that the rules and regulations of Discord, it really is up to you as a server owner to follow them. So in extreme cases, when these rules are not followed, or the server is reported because of those rules not being followed, this could actually place your members of that server under Discord administrative review. So this is very serious, and it is highly recommended that in any server that you create, there is an explicit rules channel where your members can visually see what these guidelines are. So although these are online and you can look them up, it is your server, so it is highly recommended that these are posted, that they are visible, and they're easy for your students or users to see. I did attach the link here under discord.com/terms, but these are probably your biggest 8 takeaways, because it is pretty intimidating to read this entire terms of service. But misinformation, that includes anything related to false or misleading, that includes a significant risk of physical or societal harm. Number 2, impersonation with malicious intent is not tolerated, and this includes pretending to be someone else and joining a school server, faking an email, stuff like that. Spam and software manipulation is not tolerated. Number 4, age-restricted content is not allowed. This includes gore, graphic, things that are deemed greater than the age of 13. Like this, it has tried to keep it PG, right? Because the users of the server in Discord must be at least 13 years or older. That is from Discord's terms of service. I know that there are cases that 13-year-olds and younger are using Discord, but for the sake of Discord's terms of service, your users must be 13 years or older to use this technology properly. Hate speech is not tolerated. Grounds for profile removal. Off-platform membership and distinguished hate groups and grounds for termination. Excess gore, violence, not tolerated. And malicious reporting of users of servers is not tolerated. Again, check out the entire link. It is posted right here. I highly recommend you read through this, but out of all the takeaways, these are your top 8 here that you should really be digging in with your server rules. It is also highly recommended that, much like the rules, you set up an explicit summarized version of community guidelines, because things like this that are shared into a school server, like school work, really bring out some concerns with intellectual property and Creative Commons. So this is key to make sure that this is out in the open and visible for your students to see. Again, the link to this is actually in the terms of service. There's another button that says community guidelines, but these are another top 8 big takeaways. So the server does not tolerate the purchase, transfer, licensure of personal accounts, reserves the right to your data, which we will touch on later. Do not use this Discord server to gain access to attack Discord's malware, scraping us, transmitting virus, malicious code, and do not use Discord or this server to commit any crime or infringe on anyone's intellectual property rights. So again, these are 2 things that are highly recommended to be explicitly posted, explicitly seen for your students in your server, whether this is in a rules channel or like the first message in general. highly recommended. For the sake of example, this is something in the orange here that I wrote out for this server. So, rules, etiquette, please be kind and courteous, keep posts organized, remember that not everyone in this server is Discord expert, everyone must follow Discord's community guidelines, memes, images, GIFs that do not contribute to meaningful conversation may be deleted, all images, GIFs, memes must follow Discord's terms of service, explicit content including gore, sexual content, graphic imagery, explicit links not allowed, and school content shared in the server must not violate school rules related to cheating or improper sharing of course material. The reason why I put this in here is because although servers are servers and students can have their own personal servers, things that are posted in a school server, if we are setting this up for educational purposes, we need to make sure that that is appropriate use of course content. So answers to tests, answers to assignments, those may not be allowed and should not be shared in this server, because that's where we get into broader issues related to cheating and improper use of educational materials. You always want to have someone to contact. So in this case, this is my name. If anybody has any questions, concerns, being open and available to your students, especially with a heavy topic like adoration supervision. Just something to really keep in mind, because nobody's an expert at all of this stuff, and being ready and available to help your students is really big. So step 2 of this entire equation here is we start getting into supervision. So if we're setting this up to have an education, this is supposed to be a classroom, it is a big issue for behavioral concerns, because on one hand you want to keep this server casual because it is not a physical classroom, but on the other hand you need to make sure that this behavior is classroom and school appropriate. This is where we start getting into things called roles. So this is how we maintain this order, how we maintain these rules. So when you set up a server, you really want to have 2 higher level roles and then your regular membership roles. So first off, moderator. Moderator is usually if you choose to have a trustworthy student or a TA or a student teacher or like a second helper who has minor abilities like muting people in a voice call if they are getting too rowdy, deleting messages if they are not appropriate for the server, and moving people from voice calls. This can happen if someone joins the voice call by mistake, doesn't know how to leave, or forgets to leave the call and shuts off their computer. A moderator has that permission. This is set up in the settings, which I will get into a little bit, but again, giving a moderator these permissions is usually someone who you trust. It is always recommended to have at least a few mods whom you trust, because you as a server owner cannot always be online at the same time. You cannot always be, looking and seeing what messages are being sent. So having a second helper or a few, depending on the size of your group, that have these permissions that can really step in emergencies is pretty big for maintaining the integrity of the server. The administrator is the adult. I would never recommend giving this role to any student or anybody that is not an adult or a teacher or an educator or someone who is not a student, basically. It has all of the abilities that I just mentioned of muting, deleting, moving, and it also has the ability to remove someone, ban them, kick them, do updates, add channels, add categories, move things around, add events, etc. Manage roles. It's a lot. So you do not want to put students into this role. I'm not saying that students cannot be trustworthy. However, with the amount of privilege that this role has, it is highly recommended that only adults have this role, mostly because this is the highest power anyone in the server can have at any point in time. So roles are used mostly to moderate, to separate what people can see and what people can do. This is how we start to make a role. So first things first, we're going to click on the drop down arrow on the right of the server title. So we're going to be clicking here. We're going to go to server settings, and while in server settings, we're going to navigate to create role. I will do this in a second. I'm just going to get this out of the way here. There's a lot of things to unpack when we get to the page where we start selecting for permissions for roles, and not all servers will have this high level of permissions. Some of them are just for fun, some of them are just to separate, you know, keep narrowing down who can do what and where. But like I said, an admin, a moderator, a student, that's basically what you need for an educator's guide. So we're going to click here on this arrow. We're going to go to server settings. We're going to go to roles, and we're going to create a new role, right? So let's say this new role is going to be student 2. And in student 2, we're going to make them yellow. So when we click on here, we may see permissions. Basically, if we're setting this up as a student view, we want them to see the channels. We do not want them to manage the channels. We do not want them to create, edit, or delete. We do not want them to see the roles. We do not want them to add stickers. We do not want them to see this log. We do not want them to see the webhooks. We do not want them to change anything with the server. Depending on your group, you may not want them to invite new people, so for the sake of this, we can turn it off. We do want them to change their nicknames. We can set them to like their first last name or first middle last. We do not want them to change others' nicknames, kick them, or ban them. We do not want them to time them out. But you do want them to send messages. So it's recommended to have these on, like sending message in threads, attaching files, using emojis, mention everyone at here in all roles. This one depends on the size. If you have a group of, let's say, 50 students, it might not be wise to have the ability to ping everyone. But if you have a small group of like 20 to 25, and you need to get someone's attention, or you need to get everybody's attention, this is what you could use. So depending on the size of your group, for the sake of this example, we'll turn it off. But seeing message history, commands, when we get to voice, we obviously want them to connect, to speak, to use their video, to use activities. If this is a strictly educational server, you might want to turn this off because activities are more games. But I would not give them any of these permissions to mute or deafen or move people. You do not want them to give them events. And this is the big dangerous permission. You do not want to give people this permission unless this is for an adult. Okay? Again, do not give this permission to students because it could wreak havoc on your server, because they can just change whatever they want, including deleting it. So, again, do not give them that permission. So after that, you hit save, you hit escape, and there you go. You just created a new role. So when you click on students over here to the side, you can actually press this little plus button, and let's say I'll give myself student 2. I have administrator, so obviously it's going to look a little bit different, but if you had a student in here, then bam, there you go. Now they can't mess with the server, and you just created your first role. So on a closing note, it is recommended to have at least one role that is for visiting only. These people who join the server can't type, cannot join voice calls, or cannot respond to messages. For larger classes and larger clubs, you might want to keep this in mind, especially since you might not know who's joining right away. So if you have a visitor role, you assign it the same way. You click on the person, you hit the plus button, and you hit visitor. Again, I have administrator, so it looks a little bit different. But if I had visitor, I would not be able to see any of these, and I would just be able to look. So if you have a big club and people are just visiting, or you have parents popping in and out of the server, which I know that there have been cases where that's the case and you don't want them to type, like that is perfectly an option to have. With that being said, server rules, moderation, huge learning curve. It does not have to be perfect. And just remember that if you are enforcing behavioral issues in your educational server, it is really best to leave that to the adults, because, I mean, we're talking about removing, banning, muting people, deleting messages. That is strictly for adults. Your student helpers might be able to do some of those menial tasks, but if we're talking large behavioral issues, you want to reserve that to an adult. Server rules are the hardest to learn, but I guarantee you that once you know them, it was really easy to integrate. It'll click. I promise. It just takes time. Not all servers are the same, so you might not like that administrator mod student, the example that I have here. You might want multiple different ones, and that's okay. And some of the roles that I just gave you might not be relevant to you. That is okay. Discord is customizable, so learning what is best for your students, for your adults, is key. And when in doubt, just leave the power to do server-wide updates and changing big things in the server. Leave that to the adults. That is the number one rule. If you are unsure, do not ever give anybody permission to change anything besides you. Alright, I know, long video. With that being said, I promise videos 4, 5, and 6 are going to be a lot shorter than this. Thank you all for tuning in and watching. This has been video 3, Moderation and Supervision, and I will see you in video 4, Customization. Thanks.